Good afternoon. My name is Missy Hicks, and I am the co-founder of Wonders and Worries and the Director of Outreach for our Registered Provider Program. I wanted to thank you for joining our second WonderChat, where we're going to have three fantastic clinicians share some specifics with you about their virtual work. I do hope you're all holding up okay, though, the best as you can, really, in these challenging and really ever-changing times. I know for me, I look forward to Friday now and seeing your names come across my screen, because it really gives me a sense of connectedness in a time when we are all learning to function in like a lot of new and unfamiliar and different ways. So I'm glad you could join us. People are loading on, I can see them logging on. So just a couple of housekeeping items quickly. Your audio is muted automatically when you come in, so you don't have to worry about that. And we cannot see you, so don't worry about that as well. No videos are up there except for ours. At the end, like tomorrow, you will get an email that has a link to the survey. If you complete the survey, automatically it will bounce back a certificate of attendance to you. As well, at the end, there'll be a QR code on the screen. I will leave it up longer this week. I apologize, that was my fault last week. Again, learning curve, new to the technology piece of hosting a webinar. So I will absolutely leave it up longer for you this week. And I did get some clarification on the professional development units. And it's as I thought. If you attend this session live and you complete the survey and you get the certificate, that will qualify for professional development units. You have to just match it to the right exam content outline. If you listen to it, just the audio, because it does not offer a quiz, so if you listen to it in 2 weeks off of the website, we cannot issue a PDU certificate. So all of you who are live will be able to use this towards your recertification. And then the recorded session, some resources that you'll hear people talk about, and the question and answer piece will be on the website after the session. Give me a couple days though. And then finally, we will use the Q&A feature again, as we did last week, and I'll manage the questions. We're gonna try to hold them mostly till the end, unless I feel like I need to interject something into one of our speakers earlier than that, but we will have time at the end to answer those. And if we don't get to your question, we'll do our best to at least type the answers and have that in the uploaded document later. So let's get started. So we're all walking through this together and evolving as we go. So I hope that these sessions will be, will continue to serve as a mechanism to get your wheels turning as you're trying to find ways to support families in your setting. So last week we talked about the decision-making and our process at Wonders and Worries to take our our typically in-person sessions to virtual. And a quick update on that is our staff has been providing many sessions, typically 3 to 5 a day. And as you can imagine, they're learning a lot. And initially we said we wouldn't be providing group. However, like I said, evolving times. After being inspired by a webinar that was presented by the National Alliance for Grieving Children, and yes, I'll put that on our resource list, we are going to start offering a virtual teen group next week, starting next week. So that's just a quick update from the Wonders and Worries side of things. But I'd love to introduce our speakers now for today. First one we'll have will be Kia Farrar, and she's a child life specialist in private practice in Chicago. She also founded Telechild Life to help teach child life specialists about providing virtual sessions. So she will share with you like an overview related to engaging children online and tips for sessions for in-session relationship building. And then we'll have Deanna Smith. She is the lead child life specialist at the Wonders and Worries office in San Antonio, Texas. And then Lisa Chiroka is a child life specialist in private practice in New Jersey, and she is also one of our registered Wonders and Worries providers. Both Lisa and Deanna will walk you through 2 sessions they provided virtually and share their thoughts with you about what has worked and maybe what hasn't worked for them as they've sort of traveled this path. So I'd like to turn it over to Kia to get us started.
Hello, everyone. So good to be here. Missy, thank you for having me. And Telechild Life kind of derived from this feeling of, I have a few skills that I can provide virtually to patients and families that I use on a daily basis. And so a way to give back during this time is this skill set. So Telechild Life is an initiative kind of started as a way to just say, hey, you have this as a child life specialist. We just have to kind of virtualize those interventions you already know and you're really good at. So the first part of Telechild Life for me is understanding that there needs to be some sort of way to explain how you are going to be present in this virtual box, right? So like you can see in the slide, that code switch feeling. Okay, I'm usually building rapport with a child and family in a patient room. How am I going to do it in this box here? So being really aware of what you're wearing, the background, what's stimulating about the environment, how your body language, you know, I use my hands a lot, but in person I try not to, and then in here I do a lot. So just being, you know, very self-aware of who are you, your own identity as a child life specialist, and how can you just kind of refocus your attention on this little box, right? Instead of a patient room or someone's home, whatever your environment is. And then assessing the family's digital citizenship is huge, right? Who are they as digital citizens? What, you know, what type of mobile devices do they have? What type of computers? What type of technology are they used to? Are they from, you know, a very rural town where connectedness is huge, maybe through virtual, but they may not have a device or, so yeah, so really trying to figure out with the family, hey, who are you as digital citizens? I don't name it that way. I usually say, okay, who are you virtually, right? And then we kind of develop that rapport and understand who we are virtually. Talk a little bit about each other, right? And then talk about the materials that we're using. So usually I engage with the parent first. And then I see where, you know, where the mom, the dad, the caregiver, what the best place in the home is, what the best place in the hospital is, creating that environment together, and then kind of refocusing your attention on making an experience just for that family. So the next kind of slide, this is a virtual interaction, right? So we talked about how we should present ourselves across the screen, you know, kind of figuring out this reciprocal relationship. What will it look like? And for that, I call it a virtual interaction, right? Because we're interacting with someone, we're building relationships virtually. And many of you that I've spoken to in the Telechild Life trainings, how do I engage a child in the screen, right? How do I make my 4-year-old sit still? Well, they sit still for Sesame Street, and they sit still for Daniel Tiger, and they sit still for Nickelodeon Teen. And there are some techniques that come with that, right? So understanding how to engage the people in the room, the parents, kind of measuring how the child is outside of the virtual session. Did he or she or they come in and they're all over the place and energy is everywhere, and how do we kind of focus it inward, change our tone, change our voice to meet them where they are. And with that, I kind of call that an etiquette, right? So a virtual etiquette for child life is what you make of it. There's no set of rules. We didn't, you know, get certified to learn how to be virtual, but you have to be really cognizant of what kids are seeing, right? The mental picture. So obviously this is a really stimulating background, but I did it intentionally because this is not what I would have for a child. If I'm talking to you in a webinar and parents like, oh, what are those pictures there? What's this plant? It's fun. It's a great way to just interact naturally from an office setting. But with kids, I usually have a whiteboard or a picture or something in the background that's kind of just plain. That way I am able to manipulate what's behind me and they're not focusing on my kids right there. So really understanding what is in the background and how to engage a child, but then also switch what this box looks like, which I'll tell you in a second. So tips and lessons learned. This is kind of where I wanted to spend the most time because trial and error, right? For 6-7 years, I've been doing virtual sessions. I call them hybrids, where I go to the family's home and provide therapeutic child life interventions, but then they go out of town, or a lot of my families have camp over the summer. And I want to, you know, create that consistency of care. So I make sure that I can see them when they're in Indiana for the weekend or when they're in Michigan for the weekend. And so I always kind of say, let's try one virtual session, you know, because it's kind of like cloning yourself, right? You're able to go where the parent is, and that's been really valuable. But also thinking creatively took a lot of time. And people are like, oh, just be creative. Creativity is really hard, right? So utilizing what is out there to help you understand what I call edutainment. So Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers do that all the time. Education and entertainment, right? That's their kind of, you know, golden rule. I've had therapy myself via teletherapy with professors, mentoring. And so being on the giving and receiving end of teletherapy is really helpful. So watching YouTube videos, you know, maybe even engaging with a therapist that does virtual sessions, because there's a lot that comes with it, and it's kind of a culture, and understanding that code switch, I think, is nice. So I always say benchmark, right? Find out, you know, what are people doing behind the screen that is engaging for a 4-year-old, for a 7-year-old, and with that comes some child development knowledge, right? Does a 4-year-old understand the abstract concept that you're talking about, right? You don't have materials to show them that they can manipulate, but having something that is, you know, age appropriate, but then also that you can explain through sight, right? Because that's what this is all about. It's through sight. So Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers, that is my golden rule, my like very, very big tip and trick. If you get anything from this webinar, it's to benchmark, watch Sesame Street over and over again. I probably saw 15 episodes. And what I learned from them is something that I wanted to share with you, and that's part of Telechild Life. So provoke a reaction. That's one of the biggest things, because it's unexpected. So while you're having a session, you know, create the space where something is all of a sudden amusing, or, you know, you go from a really fun story and you show a book, but then, you know, 5 minutes after, you know that maybe they need a calm break because they're a little overstimulated, and you switch to a meditative Zen, right? So kind of understanding that, provoking a reaction based on what age, what is stimulating to that child, and meeting them where they're at. And then something that's kind of nice to flow through whatever activities you're bringing, or whatever interventions, or whatever your therapeutic goal is for them to learn, is remember to deliver a series of short and sharp, good information. I call them little shocks, little education shocks, right? That kind of jolt the child a little bit to go, all right, I'm engaged with you, and now I'm in a heightened sense of engagement. And I use puppets for that. So I typically have this guy that many of you have probably seen in my own Telechild Life videos. I know, I'm gonna tell them, just give me a second, okay? So this is Simon, and I bring Simon with me on every virtual session if they're 7, 6 years. I know, you are 3 years old, I know. 3.5. And so I learned this from Sesame Street, right? These intermixed segments to be created, kind of like commercials, little jolts of information and education. And then this sneaky way of putting in, hang on a second, this sneaky way of putting in this educational piece, right? In there, you're putting a little pocket of learning as you're, I know, hang on one second. As you're talking to them, you know, what are you using the space for, right? And so puppets and materials that are engaging and entertaining, and then again, just kind of delivering these short little things of information. Before I leave you and get you on to the next speaker, I wanted to give you just a few examples that I've used. We all have examples with our case studies, and you'll hear a lot of great activities and interventions, but there are some kind of general tools that I've used to mock a live medical presentation or preparation. I typically use livebinders.com or Keynote or some sort of something that can put pictures and you know, words, age-appropriate words for different ages, for different procedures, so that as I'm talking, they can see pictures and other type of visual presentations of what I'm trying to teach them. Screencasting is a really neat tool that you're able to just kind of show what you're teaching, but then also they can see you talking. Screencasting is a great one. You know, for facilitating emotional expression, there are a lot of great tools out there, especially the ones that have the different faces and generally, you know, you can help the child pick the different emotions, and then creating this space for emotional expression, right? And then making sure that what you're doing is effective. It's really nice to just evaluate how they're feeling. You know, in the beginning, are they sad? Are they mad? And then checking in. And I know Deanna will talk about that in a little bit, about ways that you can do that. But on this website, all these websites, these are ones that I use that are free. They're easy to use with all different ages, and it makes a boring screen just a little bit better. All right, on to Deanna. Thank you.
Hi, thanks, Kia. I am Deanna, Child Life Specialist at Wonders and Worries. So in San Antonio, typically we see children and teens in our office setting. We have either a playroom or a teen room. And currently we are seeing our kids and teens virtually, now doing all virtual sessions. So the first case study I wanted to just give you is a 13-year-old male. His dad has non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So I saw him for 3 sessions in our office prior to the pandemic and everything shutting down. And we have since had 2 sessions virtually. We did give him the option, would you rather wait and we continue sessions when the world opens back up again, or would you like to do the sessions virtually? And he opted virtually. So I already had that relationship established with him. My therapeutic goal for the session that I'm going to talk about with him was to identify his angry feelings and then start talking about what are some healthy coping techniques and how we're going to work through that. So in the session I did with him, we read the book, Don't Pop Your Cork, on Mondays. So I held it up and we read it through together. And we stopped and paused at certain parts. We practiced taking deep breaths together. We practiced belly breathing. And we practiced several other different coping techniques, and we did it together. Also in this session, I had him create a target. So most of you are really familiar with the targets anyway, and this can be used with any client population. But just having him at home have a paper and markers, so stuff that he already has at home, create a target of what makes him angry about his dad's cancer, or even currently just even with the coronavirus. And I had him tape it up, and I watched there with him while he took wet tissues and threw it at the target. He loved it. It was a rainy day that day I worked with him, but another option is to have them have chalk either on a fence at their home if available, or on the driveway or sidewalk, whatever's available to them if they have the option, and then to throw water balloons. And that can be a neat family event that they can all do together if it's nice out. So as far as an evaluation of the session, how it went, I felt it went really well. He said it did. One tool that we're using, we have this thermometer right here. We ask the clients at the beginning of each session, where are they? How are they feeling today? So this particular boy, he said he started at a 6. And then when I asked him again, we bring it back out again at the end of the session, how are you feeling now? He said he was a 9. So that's a good indicator to me too on how helpful the session was. If you're interested in getting access to this thermometer, you can find it on the Wonders and Worries Facebook page and print it off from there. My second case study was a 12-year-old female. So my very first time to meet her was in this virtual session. So I did not have that rapport already established with her. Now I did send a picture in my bio to mom through email so that she can at least show her, oh, this is who I'm talking to, this is a little bit, so she has a clue. But her mom has stage 4 breast cancer. And my goal in this session was just to establish the rapport. Like, who is this strange new person that I'm going to be meeting through video? And so just to get comfortable with each other and establish that rapport. So we play the Skittles. She actually had M&Ms. You can use Skittles or M&Ms get to know you game. If you don't have access to Skittles or M&Ms, there is a virtual wheel that you can get online for free at wordwall.net, and the child can spin it, and you are able to then see how many colors they have. That's how many answers you give for questions. And so I played along with them, and we go back and forth. So that's a good place to start the conversation and to start chatting. So that really broke the ice there. Something else that I did with this girl that's really fun is a family scavenger hunt. So I had her gave her like 2-3 minutes, just go around your home, find an item, so maybe a stuffed animal or a figurine or some item that resembles each member of your family, including yourself. And so she went and did that, and she came back and she found items like a cell phone for her sister. She had a teddy bear for herself, a remote for her mom, etc. And that was really fun. And you could really see her just light up. And she spent a really long time talking about all these different items. And that clues me into the family dynamics and how kind of things are going on and how she's viewing the members of her family. So that's really effective. And then I also read, we have a book that we like to read too, The Hope Tree. I read an excerpt from here just about another child that talked about when she found out that her mom had breast cancer. And then this girl talked to me about what it was like when she first was told by her mom that her mom had breast cancer. So again, with this session, at the beginning of the session with her, she told me she was a 7, that she was having a pretty good day. And at the end of a session, she told me she was a 9. And later her mom did text me saying that she loved the session, she thought it went well. So overall, I would feel like it went well. So therefore, I've established that rapport with her. And I feel like the next session I meet with her, we are going to be able to go in a little bit deeper and dig in a little bit more. So now that she can entrust me a little bit more. So moving on to some tips and tricks that I have.
Deanna, sorry, mate. Can I just ask a question quick that has come through before you move on?
Yes.
The question was, Deanna, do you use the thermometer tool for in-person sessions typically, or was this just a tool that you all made just for virtual sessions?
So that's a good question. So we have this tool for in-person. I don't use it as consistent in person as I have been virtually, but after doing this virtually, when we go back to seeing clients in the office, I feel like I'm going to start using it more consistently. It's kind of just varied with the client that I've seen. And so it's something that we're using a little more routinely now, and I probably will continue to do that. I really like it. It's very helpful.
Great, thank you. And then this one might be for you and Lisa as well, but I'll have you answer it now. How long is this session typically?
Good question. So typically in office, our sessions are about 45 minutes to an hour. And I have found that's about what they're running virtually as well. Now I've had a couple teens that are just so excited to talk. My sessions are actually running a little over an hour. But then I'll get my young ones and we might be running closer, like the, 7, 6, 7, and we might be running closer to the 30, 45 minute range. But I would say typically for me, it's 45 minutes to an hour.
Great, okay. I'm going to continue to look at and collate some of these questions, but I'm going to let you move on your slide. Hold on one second.
Okay. So some of the tips that I have, that I've learned, is have several different icebreaker game options available. So let's say, for the Skittles, that's a great icebreaker. Let's say I wasn't able to get Skittles to them or to mail them to them, or they didn't have anything like that at home. You can use the spin wheel, but maybe they're not able to, we're having issues with the screen or things like that. So other options that I just wanted to share, would you rather game. You can print off the questions and I'll hold them up and we'll read it together, and that starts a conversation. Card games, any card games you can play. Uno, we play Uno a lot, and you can even, and if they have Candyland, you can use Uno or Candyland or things like that with colors to have the feelings games with it. Rock, paper, scissors. That's another another great icebreaker game you can do. We have another child life specialist that she incorporates her pets as a great icebreaker. So she has her pets there, and that kind of helps ease how they're feeling. Another one is place yourself near the Wi-Fi router. So I discovered in my home personally, our router is downstairs, and I was having sessions upstairs, and I kept getting this unstable connection. So I had to find a different location to be closer to the router. Or I recently learned that a lot of cell phones, your cell phone provider has a hotspot, and you can connect your cell phone to your computer and use that hotspot. So just to be aware of that and test that before your session. And also to test before your session is the video in the background. So are you in your bedroom? Is your bed showing in the background? Is there other private items that maybe is not appropriate that should be seen? So just to be aware of what's going on, but also to know that we're people too, and like them, and they kind of think it's, oh, that's cool. Look at that. Look, there's her dog, or there's her cat, or you know, things happen. I've had my 3-year-old barge in on the session before, and so just for them to see that we're not perfect either, and things happen, but just to be aware of the background. I wanted to share sibling sessions. So I have done sibling sessions. I have had some successful sibling sessions, and I've also had at least one that I did not feel like was great or ideal. It was 3 siblings. They were all talking over each other. The youngest one was 7. He went and ran and hid behind a chair, and then was hiding under the table and still trying to talk to me. I was having a hard time hearing who was talking, what was going on. So with this particular family, I decided that they needed to be seen separately. So just to keep in mind, especially if there's a big age difference, on maybe they do need to be seen separately, whether you schedule it for different days or back to back, whatever's best for the family. Sometimes it does work though with siblings. So trying to figure that out as well. Screen sharing, I love this. So when we're doing video chats like this, right now you can see Missy's screen. So the same thing when I'm having a session with clients, for example, we have a sport teaching video that one of our child life specialists has. And so it's a YouTube video. And so I already have it ready to go on my screen, and I'm still talking with the child. They can still see me in the little square. I can still see them. We're watching the video together. We can both hear it. We can talk over it. I can pause it at any time. It's awesome. It's a great tool to use along with teaching. I did a Huntington's disease education piece, and we were able to watch a video together with the teen, and we were able to read some stuff together and kind of take time and absorb it. So that's a really neat function to be able to use as well. So those are my big tips and tricks that I have. I'm liking virtual sessions now. I was a little skeptical at first, but it's fun. It's fun. I like it. So with that, we will move right on over to Lisa.
I've been a child life specialist for approximately 30 years, and my role was in the hospital setting. Within the last 5 years, I have been in a child life private practice. I am grateful to be here today to share how I am helping my clients cope with transition in the uncertain times. You will see some visuals of some of the tools I use, but it varies from client to client. I also want to clarify that in the private practice world, we do use the phrase client as opposed to patient, but it really is interchangeable depending on who you're working with. And most importantly, I think we all need to realize that we are vulnerable, and we are getting used to doing the same things that our clients and patients are getting used to doing, and that's using technology and trying to get comfortable with it. So what I first did was try to get comfortable with the technology that I had so that I can work with the clients so that they can be as comfortable as can be as well. So my first case study is a sibling. She's 10 years old. She has a sister who is 13 years old who was diagnosed with a brain tumor. They came into my office when the sister was just about to complete treatment. They were referred to me. The opening session for her, for the sibling, is I try to use something where we can talk about feelings, and we will have this as a resource. So these are called How Are You Feeling? How Am I Feeling cards. And we use this in an assessment. So an example would be, so this is a picture that you would get. So it's this, obviously this is 2 tomatoes. And this is saying, is this big tomato worried, sad, proud, nervous? How do you feel when somebody, it looks like this? It has this on the back. So we'll try to get a idea of where she's at for that session. She's somebody who enjoys crafts. She loves to play games. When we first started this, obviously it was due to the quarantine. And when I asked her how she was doing with that, ironically, she said that she was, this was similar to when she couldn't go a lot of places because her sister's immune system was suppressed. So she wasn't as uncomfortable with that. She was used to being, not able to go all the places that she had wanted with the family. But during her sister's treatment, she expressed that she felt like she was alone. She felt that her life was put a little bit on hold. Her sisters had to take priority. And while she understood that, she went through a lot of disappointment and anger. And when she came to me, she was referred to me because she was feeling more angry and feeling more resentful towards her sister. She spent a lot of times with her grandparents, and mom really didn't know a lot of this. And as mom said to me when she first came in, she was so upset that she didn't know that it was this deep-seated for her daughter. So what we did was, she loves playing games. What I tried to do is I try to see, when I first started a new virtual session, I try to assess where the client is and what they have available to them. So for instance, this family loved to do crafts. They had tons of crafts and supplies on their end. So I knew that I can get a list of those, ask the mom, ask the child, and I would be able to come up with some activities that we could do virtually. As far as games, just as Deanna said, we've adapted games, and we've all done this. I mean, you play, some hospitals do virtual bingo, so they do that. Uno, it is a favorite, so we take out our Uno cards. She has a pack on her end. I have a pack on my end, and you decide who's going to be the person who's going to have the card to work from. And she would say, green 0, and I would say, oh, green 5, and put it down, and we would do it that way. What this does do is it creates some normalcy. It creates a feeling of letting your guard down a little bit, as we all know in child life, and it opens up the client to talk about their feelings. She opened up tremendously during the game. She talked a little bit about the fact that even at home quarantine, she didn't get to choose where she was going to do her homework. It had to be where her sister was comfortable. But she did talk a little bit about processing the feelings. And through all this, I was actually able to bring the family on a virtual call. And that was done with permission from the 10-year-old to say, why don't we see, would you like to share some of these feelings? And we worked very hard at deciding what she wanted to say, and sometimes she wanted me to say it. And it was really a great experience. When we all fit in the box, as Kia said, we were really able to get a lot from that. One of the things for feedback on this particular client that I thought was wonderful was there was a lot of laughter. And later the mom texted me and she said it was so nice to be in the other room and to hear her laughing, like belly laughing during all of this. Then what I would do at the end is I would show another of those feelings cards. So this is an onion. I know, it may not look like the onion. And it said, who is calm and who is very unhappy? And we would talk a little bit, and she said, I'm calm and I'm happy. And we talk a little bit more about that. So I think sometimes you have to think about what are the tools that you have? How can you take those tools and transfer them to who's on the other side of this screen? And how could you make this adaptable, obviously for the age of the child or adolescent, so that they get the most out of this? So I would, after that, I would assess that and document her reactions, document the session, and we would decide what we were going to focus on for the next session so that she can be prepared and I can be prepared. The next case study that I'm going to talk about is an 18-year-old male. This particular study, the case study that I'm going to talk about, this male, he was diagnosed with a pancreatic tumor, wasn't feeling well, and went and was had to have it resected. That was the treatment for it. He came to me after being told that they saw something else on the scan and that they believed that it might be the start of another tumor. We only had one session in the office. So basically that session turned into assessing his needs. He was very talkative. He had his mom with him. He wanted, I give choice. He wanted mom to be able to stay. I noticed there was a lot going back and forth between him and his mother, what she felt he should do and what he felt he should do. And subsequently, since we have been on our virtual calls, mom has not been on them. He has set them up for himself. He actually asks me, do I have this time, this time, this time on this particular day? And what's coming out now in this is there's a lot of worry that he is actually getting ready to go to college. And when will this tumor come? It could be months, it could be years. But the worry is that maybe he should look at a college that's a little closer. So that was a decision that his parents, as he said, forced on him. But we did process it. We talked about you're in the best place for the major that you are going for. Best place case scenario for the choices that you have. It's far enough that you're away, but close enough if you have to go to a hospital, local hospital, you can. He talks the whole session. He leads the session. I assess him by, his age. I can actually ask him how he's doing. I can ask him, how is he coping? We did some deep breathing, and we talked a little bit about what he likes to do to calm himself down. He shared that he likes to draw, so we talked about him drawing some of his feelings. He loves to talk, so he actually is in his room and he has, his desk set up and he just keeps going. At the end of the session, he's like, he can't believe it's over already. He can't believe the time is over already. But I think sometimes we might underestimate ourselves as child life specialists to think that maybe we need it always to be doing something. And to be honest with you, to be accessible, to be present, to be able to listen, to be able to give input when input is needed is really part of normal activities. So we try to bring some normalcy. So that's something that I've learned along the way, that even being present and seeing a face is very comforting for these clients that I see. So as I said, those are how I evaluate the session. It really is based on the age of the child and what I'm seeing initially in the evaluation. You can also use a 1 to 10 scale, how you're feeling, 1 not well, 10 great, and I mean feeling maybe not physically but emotionally, and we've used that in the past as well. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about maybe some of the lessons that I've learned, and I am still learning just like everyone. So first, as I believe Deanna mentioned, to decide where you will be physically, to set it up. I wind up doing some test runs to make sure, look, like in the back now you see there's a desk, there's a picture, there's flowers, like what do I need in the background? As Kia mentioned, I actually have a whiteboard that I do put up, and I have used that for interactive games. I've used that to stick things on there. I've used it for the target. So that's something that is, it's easy enough if you have that. I do have the physical office, but we are quarantined, so I have been using the space in my home. You have to make sure that your area is quiet. I brought home my sound machine, so I'll put the sound machine outside of the home office. I'll make sure that I have older children, but I'll make sure, they're all doing their work. My husband's teaching, so I'll make sure everybody knows that I just say outside the door, client this time to this time. So no names, but they'll know, and they'll hear the sound machine, so they'll know. Always familiarize yourself with your client and what your session goal is before you start. So as I said, do they have the materials that you're going to ask of them? What's the goal that week? Is the goal that they need to process something that's happening? In the instance of the 18-year-old, our goal last week was that he was going for some testing. And even though he has looked everything up, he wanted to process it and he wanted to clarify things. So that was a goal. This week coming up, I think the goal is going to be that we're going to talk more about, how it went. He has to go on virtually with his college. He wants everybody to know. He doesn't want to, he wants them to know that there could be this time where he's going to have to leave the school. Make sure you have the things for your sessions, not just on their side, but on your side, because you will want to be able to like with the cards, you're going to be, you don't want to say pick a card for me, because it doesn't feel like you're really, as the client said, doesn't feel like you're playing the game so much. But we even did some stuff for Passover and Easter with pipe cleaners and things like that. So that was another thing for around the holidays. And before you end your session, establish a time for next session. Try not to leave it open-ended, like, oh, I'll reach out to you and you let me know. What I usually say is most of my clients have set times and days. Some are every week, some are every other week, some are once a month. I usually say, does this time work for you? Does the same time work for you? Because it works for me. If there has to be a reason why you have to alter it, like when this client had to go on to his college, we just switched it to a different day. But I think it's important to have that continuity so that they know and they're able to be ready for you and you be ready for them. So, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Lisa and Kia and Deanna. So some fantastic questions have been coming through. And as we've been going, I know that you've been seeing some of the answers listed. I want you to know that through the Q&A function, I'll be able to cut and paste those answers, so you don't have to be writing down all of these websites that people are talking about. They'll be, I can cut and paste those into a document for y'all. And then there's a few on here that we thought would be helpful to answer live. We left, I knew there'd be a lot of questions, so we left some time here at the end to be able to have our panelists share their expertise with you. So there's a few that I wanted to pose to our panelists. I'm actually going to unmute Kia first. There's a few questions that have come through about parents and parents' presence in sessions. And I know last week we talked some about what our process at Wonders and Worries was about how we have parents present and things like that. So maybe, Kia, I'll have you start with, you had some thoughts about parents and intake and sort of that whole family piece. And then maybe Deanna, if there's something, I know Lisa had mentioned something about how she included parents. And then Deanna, if you want to be thinking for a second about, if you want to share anything from that Wonders and Worries perspective about the decision to have parents present or not. Kia, would you like to start?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Jessica, that is a great question. She asked, how do you connect with caregivers at through a telehealth session, a virtual session, especially since they're at a distance, and how do you assess that situation? So, I think the biggest thing is having a conversation with the parent beforehand and helping them help their child understand that this session is in lieu of an in-person. And I think what that does is it creates this dynamic between the parent and the child that you are telling them honestly and wholeheartedly, I would rather be there with you in person. But we are doing a virtual session, and I'm going to talk with your mom or dad or caregiver ahead of time. And then we are going to discuss some rules. And then that way, if you talk to the parent ahead of time, whether it's a phone call, it's, you know, how do we make this teletherapy appointment more conducive to something that can involve the parent a little bit more than we would maybe in person. Typically parents are observing, right? So developing some sort of parent coaching model, I think would be good, is kind of my last tip. You know, having you as a provider speak to the parent directly and then answer questions and guide the parent with an activity with the child. It's really nice to kind of have that reciprocity with the parent, and you can do way more. Think of the parent with the child as watching you, and then, you know, there's some reciprocity throughout that circle. So to answer your question very in plain terms, you know, I do connect with the parent before and after as much as I can, call 10 minutes, 5 minutes, because it's going to help you be a better provider. And then I always ask the parent, can I share this, or the child, can I share this with your parent? And if it's something that's not concerning or not, you know, a detriment to their safety, then I hold that information with the child because I want them to know that I trust them and that they can trust me.
Great. Thank you, Kia. Deanna. Hi there. Would you like to share some about the parental present? The other question from Boone came, and it said, how are parents present in sessions? With children up to a certain age and not teens, and are the parents asked to be silent or can they interact? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so the way that we're currently running things virtually, things we've done very different in the office, we'll see the little ones, but virtually what we're doing is ages 5 to 12, and I think it depends on the 5-year-old too. Ages 5 to 12 is the parents need to be somewhere in the room. So they need to be somewhere near, just to protect us, the child, and helping to guide them anyway. Ages 13 to 18, the parent does not have to be in the same room, but they need to be in the home somewhere so that they can be available if the teen needs them. And so what we're finding, what we're doing typically is for the 12 and under, the parents are in the same room, but they're distanced away, and they're on their computer or they're doing something on their phone, or they kind of have earbuds in, so they're right there, but that they're not fully engaging. That's something that we'll communicate beforehand. So before the session starts, I'm going to tell the parents, this is what we're doing today. Can you please have these items available? And then now there might be times where we are having a family session and we will include the parent, but I'm going to talk to them about that ahead of time and make sure the child knows as well. That we're going to have a family session, everybody's going to be together, and we're going to be doing this different games and activities together. But that is communicated beforehand what the expectations are. After a session, I'll either give a phone call, or a lot with my families, it's emailing or texting back and forth, and it's just letting them know, today we talked about what cancer is and how to continue to talk about that with your child. Not going into detail, again, just like what Kia said, unless it's something concerning. If it is something concerning, that's when we'll talk to the child or teen and be like, hey, this is something I feel like we really need to talk to your mom about. How do we want to go about this? But otherwise, what we talk about in our session still kind of stays between us, and we'll just communicate with the parent about the topics that were covered, the overall.
Great, thank you. And Deanna, while you're still on, and then Lisa, I'm going to come to you next with this same question. There was a question about documentation, and Kia typed in the question and answer. She put a great resource in there. But Deanna, can you speak to your documentation process? Because I'm sure it's different. Everyone's is going to be sort of idiosyncratic to their setting. And then Lisa, I'm going to come to you next to let you share something about documentation.
Yes. So just as in like what we're documenting, or the system that we use, is that if we're looking at, we use a system, Apricot, and so that's what we were using beforehand, and we're still using that even virtually. And so what we're documenting is what was said in the sessions, what the activities that we did, the time that was spent. I'm documenting what the child said they were on the thermometer, the number they were at the beginning of the session, and what they said they were at the end of the session. And then, yeah, what was said back and forth, anything that seemed to stick out, or things like that. So typical documentation of, I guess, what you would see within like a hospital setting as well. Is that
Great?
Does that answer
Yeah,
the question?
I think so. Thank you. Lisa?
Yes. Documentation.
Yes, please.
So I'm probably old school. So I actually write out the documentation. I do have forms. I have an initial assessment form that was created. I have consent forms. Actually have just recently had to include virtual in those forms. But I do longhand. I do similar to what Deanna said, what the goal for the session will be, how I measure the goal, what activities we did to meet the goal, and then what the evaluation and the feedback would be. And what I do is in my office, I have files on all of the clients, and they're all kept into a locked file cabinet. And I mean, I'm looking into some kind of a online type of documentation, but right now this is what has been working for me. So I use that at home as well.
Great, thank you. And Lisa, while I still have you, how about sharing some about like your referral process? There were some questions about referrals, and then typically how many sessions with a client, and cost.
Okay, so
you're different than a nonprofit like Wonders and Worries. There's no cost, but you're different. So
right, so it's hard to with cost. I think it really varies. So I'll give you an example. Would be so a lot of my referrals will come from pediatricians. So I worked in the Children's Hospital, which is, you know, an area, a referral area to where I'm working now in private practice. And those pediatricians, I've established relationships with them and also with support staff there. So I have gotten referrals from them. I've also gotten referrals from social work, child life, you know, people who were my clients. The amount that I charge, it really depends if the patient is or the client is able to try to submit that. So I'll give an example would be, let's say I charged $100 for an hour. Let's say they were able to get 80. That would be if they were able to maybe get 80% reimbursement. I don't work directly with insurance companies, but I do write out child life, the receipt. It's out of pocket. I do put a CPT code, which is a treatment code. We do not diagnose, but when I get referrals, a lot of times those referrals come with the diagnosis code. And then and only then can I put that on that. The sessions really vary because it depends on what I'm seeing people for. So if it's someone who is a chronic patient, I could see them, you know, through the duration, maybe after they come out of the hospital, maybe if they're only going to the hospital for treatments and not having any interaction with child life. Sometimes I see some for short term. I'm also a certified grief facilitator. So sometimes, you know, you'll get to a point and then I will refer them to a local support group. I do that a lot too, do referrals. It's very important that we practice ethically and in our scope of practice. So it varies. I also work with an oncology population that's paid through a fund. So that is, I do that for much less than I would charge because they're paying that. There's more of an amount, more referrals for the clients, and there's X amount in that, kind of like what the nonprofits would do. But so it varies. And yes, all my documentation is HIPAA compliant. It was reviewed by legal, and I make sure that, you know, that they sign that prior to anything.
Great, thank you. Kia, there's a question on here from Joe, and Joe asks, it might work differently when you're a nonprofit and not working in the hospital setting. However, I'm looking for tips of how to best initiate video sessions when first introducing services. I often start with a phone call to assess the family's digital capabilities. Any thoughts? Kia, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I'm happy to. It's a great question. Joe, I think the best thing to do is understand that doing a virtual session is an intervention, right? And just as an MRI or an X-ray machine that you're, teaching the child about, prepare them for the virtual session. So, take a picture of you maybe in a virtual session with someone else, or, a faux character, a puppet or something, so that you can give that to the parent and show them this is what Joe or someone is going to look like. That way, what it is it's preparing them, it's giving them education ahead of time to go, all right, this is what it's going to look like, this is what it's going to feel like, this is the sensory information, this is where the computer will be set up. So if you think about it, treat it like a procedure, right, or an intervention. That way, if you can describe in moments what it's going to be like, they have, information, they're more in control of the situation. And then, yeah, for sure, a phone call with the parents beforehand to just go over rules. And there are a lot of great ones. I'll put a tip up there as well. There are a few great websites. And it's just kind of explaining your own values for the session, your own goals, and then making those really clear ahead of time via phone call, or even if you can, video conference with just the parent at some point. I know that's a little bit extra, but it makes your time more efficient during the session with the child.
Great, thank you. Deanna, I need to get Deanna's screen up here. Deanna, there is a question, and I know Lisa talked a little bit about her referrals, but Bonnie asks, who makes the referrals, and if they aren't self-referring, do you contact them first? Do you want to talk a little bit about the process Wonders and Worries uses for the referrals, especially now in this virtual arena?
Yeah, sure. So beforehand, and still currently, we receive referrals either through our online option that they can do online, or email or phone calls. I get a lot of my referrals through email and phone calls here in San Antonio from the school counselors are still in touch with some of the students. I'll get them from social workers, from hospitals, or from treatment centers. I've had them from friends or like the parents calling themselves. Anybody can call and refer, since we are a nonprofit and not going through insurance. And so after we get the information, we'll gather the parent's name and number and the children, how many children or how old they are, if that's available. Then we will call, and I will call out and make that initial phone call. This is our program. This is what we have to offer. How can I help you? And maybe that's just a parent consult over the phone. Maybe we're going to set up virtual sessions and get started, or maybe we're going to wait and start sessions once all this blows over. So that's kind of the way we run. Pretty much anybody can refer. And then, yes, I will reach out and make that initial phone call.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to pose this question to all three of you and let you think about it for a second. Then I'm going to share something about support groups, and then I'm going to come back to you. But a question from Andrea was, any advice when you're working from home with a patient that is in a hospital and not at home? So think about that for a second, panelists. And then, there was a question about support groups, and Kia typed some great links into the portal, into the question portal, so we'll cut and paste those into your document. But as I mentioned at the beginning, that Wonders and Worries initially was not going to do group support virtually, but now has decided to, after being inspired by the National Alliance for Grieving Children webinar. So I'm going to put that link in there for you as well to take a look at that and be able to see if that's something that would work for you. And, hopefully on another call, we'll be able to update you on how our virtual support groups have been going. So now I wanted to go back to our panelists with Andrea's question about any advice if you're working from home and the patient is in a hospital and not at home. I know those aren't really settings that you guys are in, but just some thoughts on that. Let me unmute you all.
Hi, this is Lisa.
Okay.
Andrea, I'm not sure if there's any concern that's specific. So I would look at it just as if I was working, it's virtual. So if you're saying, if you're working from your home with a patient, and I am reading this right, the patient's in the hospital in your home.
Right.
Okay. So then what I would do is I would do the same types of things. Maybe I would contact you know, if Child Life is there, or if Child Life is not there, contacts, you know, get some information from the family and what they have resource wise there. It also would depend on what your goal is for that. So if it's medical teaching, that's pretty self-explanatory. I would have the teaching materials on my end, and I would show them to the child virtually. But if it was engaging in some type of a game or a craft or a session like that, I would just make sure I knew what was available to the child there. I think that at the end of the day, the fact that you're providing Child Life, you know, is the main goal. So.
Great, thank you, Lisa. Kia.
Yep.
Kia, hold on. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah. The youngest age, real quick. Yes. I have to ask that question back to Jessica. What's the youngest age you would work with as a child life specialist, right? In person? 0? For sure. You can utilize, remember, it's about that dyadic relationship between the parent, the child, maybe the new, you know, the sibling who's encountering a new sibling. So yeah, I mean, think of what things you can do to kind of help that relationship between the parent, and virtual sessions are great to have that entire interaction. You're just facilitating it.
Great, thank you. And Deanna, did you have anything you wanted to share? Just any insights of if someone is in their home and they're working with a child that might be in the hospital, so you don't have, and there might not be a child life specialist in the hospital either, so they don't have access to things.
Right. Again, I think it's just using, I mean, a lot like what Lisa said too. I think it's just using, we have the skill set, right? We don't always have to have items. So I think it's just using what's available and trying to be creative, and trying to figure out beforehand. You know, I was taught to, you know, have the child show me your room. So if they're in a hospital room, you know, take the screen and kind of show me around, like, oh, look at all that, look at all that. And while they're showing me what's in their room, I'm seeing what items are available that I can use to try and incorporate into a session with what they have. So it's really just like all child life specialists, we gotta be quick, think on the go, and be creative.
Great, thank you. And one final thing before we sign off, Kia, I was wondering, I know we've been on some calls together and talking a lot. I was wondering if you could share just for a minute with everyone about your Mr. Rogers and how to sort of engage and build that piece with children online, in particular the part about like the pauses and things like that. I think you modeled that so beautifully.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I can't take credit for it, right? Like I researched, you know, the therapeutic concepts that come out of Sesame Street. And I learned about, it's called edutainment, right? As child life professionals, we do psychoeducation. We mentally prepare kids for procedures and give them, you know, cut out the events, deconstruct them, and then explain them in age appropriate language. So it's kind of what Mr. Rogers does as well, except they're these little snapshots. They're called kind of commercials in edutainment, where you provide some information, and then you're able to kind of give them some engagement, some jolt, and then a pause. So really what it has to do is, it's that sensory information, really thinking about how that child is perceiving the sensory information. And if you look up Mr. Rogers or Sesame Street, that edutainment that they call it, there are really good tips. Just takes a little research on Google. Found a lot of them.
Great, thank you so much. Well, it looks like we are a few minutes past our time. I wanted to thank you all so much. The three of you were fantastic, and I love that we were able to bring different people from different settings together, and so I so appreciate your time. I'm going to ask the panelists to be sure that their videos are off and that they're muted. I'm going to leave the QR code up here for just a little longer.